And here we go. We're running the show. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Mike Lead Aspire sessions here, sponsored by AWS. And what we have is a treat today. So we have these. We've been running these little informational sessions here since January, and you can go back and look at it on our YouTube channel. Welcome for those that are watching this on our live stream. Well, you go back and look at those. But for the rest of the year. And as I hinted to, last week or the last couple of times we were together, AWS is going to come and they're going to talk through some of the things that are unique to AWS and their culture, and just to let you guys know and to inform you guys of what's going on. So I'm so excited to have Monica and Jackie with us today. I'm going to actually allow them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to beg out and go off camera and try to run the show from the back end. But if you're out there, you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you're watching this from a recording perspective, you can comment. We can be able to respond to those after the session as well. So without further ado, I'll bring on Monica and Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much for the introduction. Good evening to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. My name is Monica Sayed, and I'll be presenting with Jackie Elvig, as Mary said. We're excited to have been invited to chat with all of you today. Before we dive in, I do want to introduce myself. I started with Amazon in 2019 as a recruiter, a sourcer. And 2021, I was promoted to a senior recruiter. And then shortly after, I moved into a recruiting manager role. And I support the security organization, specifically security assurance. Some of the roles that we hire for in security assurance are industry specialists, technical program managers, some software developers, and some business intelligence engineers. Just to name a few, there are a couple other positions that we hire for. Prior to Amazon, I did recruit for many years, I believe about 19 years before Amazon. So I live, breathe talent acquisition, and really excited to be here today and share our leadership principles with all of you. So I'll hand it over to Jackie so she can introduce herself.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Really excited to get to share a little more information with everyone here about our leadership principles and just about ourselves. I think Monica and I could probably go on for days about recruiting and kind of our culture here and things of that nature. So please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. But again, my name is Jackie Elvig. I've been with Amazon just about 8.5 years at this point, which seems like a lifetime, to be honest. I started with our central student programs team. So we have a recruiting team here dedicated to supporting our internships and newly graduated individuals as well. I spent some time with our operations team, our finance team, supporting human resources. And now I work with Monica specifically supporting AWS security and some of those positions that she mentioned. My position here is called a senior client lead recruiter. So essentially what my responsibility is working with candidates that are going through our interview process. So I typically help ensure candidates are prepared for their final round interview with us. I'm also the person that extends an offer to a candidate if we're going that route, and ensures that they're onboarding with us and get to actually start on our first day. So excited to share a little more about our leadership principles, kind of how this ties into just AWS as well as Amazon as a whole, and then perhaps how you can utilize some of these tools kind of in your day-to-day work as well. I think a lot apply to just kind of general practices versus just being specific to Amazon. So I'll kick it back over to Monica, and she's going to start us off here.
Thank you, Jackie. So today's topic is Amazon's leadership principles, how we lean on our leadership principles to build a strong corporate culture. So if you hear LPs, that's just short for leadership principles. So we'll probably say LPs here and there, and sometimes leadership principles. So let's jump in. Why does Amazon have leadership principles? Well, Amazon's leadership principles are the root of how Amazon does business, how leaders lead, and how the customer is at the center of business decisions. At Amazon, we hold ourselves and each other accountable for demonstrating the leadership principles through our actions every day. Over time, the leadership principles have expanded, but they remain true to the core values of Amazon since day one. So some of this will make more sense to you in a moment. We have 16 leadership principles, and the last two of them are our newest leadership principles, which are on the other slide. The leadership principles, honestly, many of us take them outside of work. We even apply them in our personal lives. And that'll make sense to you as we dive into each one individually. So here are our 16 leadership principles in all their glory. I'll read through them briefly. And then, as I said, we'll dive into each one. Today, we're going to read the definition of each LP. We're going to look at some questions that will help you identify each leadership principle within yourself and possibly how to elevate each leadership principle within yourself. Since we do have 16 of them, we will spend roughly 2 minutes on each leadership principle in order to hopefully allow for some questions to come through either throughout or at the end. And then we can have an open dialogue and talk about which one is your favorite one, which one you think would be the tougher one, and so forth. So our leadership principles are customer obsession, ownership, invent and simplify, are write a lot, learn and be curious, hire, develop the best, insist on the highest standards, think big, bias for action, frugality, earns trust, dive deep, have backbone, disagree and commit, deliver results, strive to be Earth's employer, and success brings broad responsibility. So Jackie and I have divided these up between both of us. I'm going to go ahead and chat with you guys about the first 8, and then Jackie will talk to you guys about the last 8. So customer obsession. Leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customers' trust. Although leaders pay attention to competitors, they obsess over customers. To the right, you'll see calibration questions. These questions are really great for you to kind of ask them to yourself and then kind of think to yourself, how am I doing this? Am I currently doing this? So keep in mind, customers can be internal as much as they can be external. So here at Amazon, my customers can be my hiring managers, they can be my teammates, they can be peers in another organization, and MiC itself, you guys are my customers. So when it comes to customer, obsessing over your customer, ask yourself, are you solving for the best outcome or just the one that's best for your team? Okay, so think about if what you're solving for can help a nearby team, perhaps reach out to that team and get a point of contact and have a conversation. Hey, how are you guys doing this? This is what I'm working on. Can we collaborate and, take ownership of that solution? Have you built a solution that will be easy for someone else to maintain? So again, if you're solving and you feel like another team could possibly benefit from that same solution, is your process, do you have training materials? Is it easy for them to implement? So think of all these things, implement and maintain. Is there something in your area that no one clearly owns? So I think this is the best way to take ownership. If you come across something and you realize that nobody's working on this, I think it's a great thing to take ownership, and especially if it's a pain point. So if you identify a pain point and several individuals are talking about the same thing, perhaps work backwards and try to solution and own it. So that is ownership. All right, next. Oh, you know what? I just realized you guys are on customer obsession. I'm so sorry. I probably just confused you. Customer obsession. We'll come back to ownership. I jumped a slide. So with customer obsession, leaders start with the customer and work backwards. They work vigorously to earn and keep customers' trust. Although leaders pay attention to competitors, they obsess over customers. So ask yourself, do you know who your customers are? Do you know what your customer needs, expects, and wants? And are you actively solving customer pain points? And here's ownership. We just talked about ownership for a bit, but we'll take a look at it again. So leaders are owners, they think long-term, and they don't sacrifice long-term value or short-term results. They act on behalf of the entire company beyond just their own team. They never say, that's not my job. Also, we've included some quotes at the bottom of each slide, which we think are great quotes. These are all people that work at Amazon. For ownership, owners make commitments to customers and to each other, and they keep them. They respectfully challenge their peers, bosses, and others. If you see something that's not right, or if you have ownership, then you'll respectfully bring that up and be part of making it better. So at Amazon, part of it is also being able to speak up in something that you believe. And so if you're taking ownership of something, being able to explain why that is. All right. Invent and simplify. Leaders expect and require innovation and invention from their teams and always find ways to simplify. They are externally aware, look for new ideas from everywhere, and are not limited by not invented here. As we do new things, we accept that we may be misunderstood for long periods of time. It's just meaning that if you're inventing something, perhaps everybody around you, it won't make sense to them because they don't see your vision right away, but that's okay. You have to work through that. And then eventually everybody will see the final product and kind of understand what your vision was. One way to, so look at the calibration questions. Are you stuck in a rut with repetitive problems? Here at Amazon, you have the liberty to solve for these things. So if you see that something is being done many, many times, and you know that there's a better way, challenge is not the right word, but we encourage you to actually solve for those things and to find shortcuts that make things simpler. Ask, when is the last time you've set aside time for brainstorming? So brainstorming is actually one of my favorite exercises. You can brainstorm by yourself, or better yet, you can pull in a group and throw a problem on a whiteboard. You'd be amazed how many different ways something can be solved. So you can do that with your team. You can do that with, it might not be your direct team. You can brainstorm with people from different teams to see how they see the problem from a different perspective as well. Are your goals driving invention and simplification? So whenever you set your goals at the beginning of the year, or if you're setting quarterly goals, just take a look at those goals and ask yourself, what are you driving towards? Are you inventing? Are you simplifying something? Are you making something better? And will it make it better over time? So Jeff Bezos' quote is, "We live in a complex world. And if you can figure out how to make things simpler for people, they will value it." All right. The next leadership principle is our right a lot. Leaders are right a lot. They have strong judgment and good instincts. They seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their belief. In my opinion, this is one of the toughest LPs. Part of being right a lot comes with experience, knowledge, or even sometimes just tenure. I think of when I think of our right a lot, I think of nature or nurture. Some of our LPs come naturally, and other of our leadership principles you really have to nurture. And you know, I believe that our right a lot is a leadership principle that you need to nurture, and you can do that by being proactive in learning, in reading, in researching, and also by having a mentor. If you have a mentor that has more experience than you do in a particular area, you can obviously you'll learn a ton. Here at Amazon, we all have mentors from the day that from day one throughout our time here. Ways to calibrate yourself on our right a lot. How does your decision benefit the customer? Does your decision reflect long-term thinking? And have you thought through alternatives? So you want to sit down and think of different ways that you can accomplish the end result for your customer, or whether it's for your team or your organization. So think through different alternatives. And another quote from Jeff Bezos: people that are right a lot admit they are wrong quickly. Another thing for our right a lot here at Amazon is we don't hesitate to say, your idea perhaps is the best idea. Humbling ourselves. We stay humble all the time. We work around incredibly smart individuals, and we always value each other's input, going back to brainstorming, why it's so important, and seeking mentorship in order to be right a lot. Learn and be curious. So learn and be curious is actually my favorite leadership principle. I probably said that before about one of the other LPs, but learn and be curious is really my favorite leadership principle. Amazon is 100% a learning environment, and there's plenty to learn. It's available. We have internal sites with so many different skills, whether it's tech or non-tech. It's there for us to learn. Shadowing others is pretty easy to do here. And as a sourcer, my learn and be curious kicked in when I got here. And one of the first jobs I had was to hire for was machine learning. And it was new to me, actually, AI, machine learning, data science. That's, becoming way, way more popular. You're hearing about it. So one of the things I did is that I asked the hiring manager if I could sit with one of the engineers, and versus, you can sit with the hiring manager and they can tell you what they're looking for in this person that they want to hire, or you can sit down with an engineer and listen to what they're doing every day and really what it takes and the skill that it takes. So that for me was a learn and be curious moment. It added so much more clarity into what that role would entail. And you can apply this in so many different ways. So yes, learn and be curious is 100% necessary here. And another thing from learn and be curious, ask for feedback. If you ask feedback from others, you'll gain insight into other things that perhaps you can learn. Perhaps there's something that you could be better at. And who better than those that are working with you or watching you or on the other receiving end. So definitely always ask for feedback and try to learn from it and work on those things. Hire and develop the best. We take our hiring process very seriously, and we're also dedicated to developing our builders. So all of our employees were Amazonians, we're builders, and we do take time to consider every every application, every interview is, we take time to prep our candidates to interview just to make sure that we are hiring the best person for that role. During my first year here at Amazon, shortly after I started, I became a TA champion. Why is this important? Why am I telling you this? Well, the end goal of a TA champion, that was the name of the program, was to make sure that our new sourcers that were entering on day one had everything they needed to be successful. So I thought this was eye-opening. I had never seen such a program in any other organization I ever worked in, and I was really impressed on how much Amazon cares about our new hires and making sure that they're ramped properly. So that's part of develop the best. Develop the best doesn't happen just at the beginning. It's throughout your career here. It's important that your leader continues to develop you. So we'll read the description here. Leaders raise the performance bar with every hire and promotion. They recognize exceptional talent and willingly move them throughout the organization. Leaders develop leaders and take seriously their role in coaching others. We work on behalf of our people to invent mechanisms for development like career choice. Are you hiring team members who bring up the overall performance of the team and company? So we do not shy away from hiring individuals that are way smarter than us. That's ultimately what we want. We want people that are going to really raise the bar. Regardless of where employees work, are you available to coach and mentor them? So we don't only mentor those that are in our team. We mentor really anybody that's in need. Sometimes having a mentor that's outside of your direct team is really helpful, because you can ask questions that maybe you don't feel comfortable asking someone that is directly within your team because you think it's a silly question. And also getting, again, perspective from someone else. So hire and develop the best, again, huge LP that happens every day and throughout your career here at Amazon. Insist on the highest standards. Leaders have relentlessly high standards. Many people may think these standards are unreasonably high. Leaders are continuously raising the bar and drive their teams to deliver high quality products, services, and processes. Leaders ensure that defects do not get sent down the line and that problems are fixed so they stay fixed. Insist on the highest standards is a bit self-explanatory, and there's several ways that we insist on the highest standards here at Amazon. I can give you an example on the most simplest form, which I call versioning. So let's say you're working on a project. It's really simple. It's almost elementary. You have draft 1, you have draft 2, you have draft 3, then finally you have your first version. Then you have version 2, version 3, version 4. And really what you're doing is that you're making sure that you have the best product at the end. You're insisting on the highest standard. So that's one example. Then you can, something that is insist on the highest standards, perhaps when customer service, it goes with customer obsession. Something that I did mention at the beginning is that our LPs at times blend together a lot of times. They start blending together. So by insisting on the highest standards, we are being customer obsessed. And so some of the calibrating questions, if you encounter a bug in an internal tool and devise a workaround, does the workaround become the new standard procedure? The answer to that should be no. You want to make sure to come back and fix it. So here at Amazon, sometimes depending on what we're working on, we may work quickly to solve a problem. And in working quickly, we may come up with a solution that is temporary, and that's fine. But insisting in the highest standard means that you're going to come back and you're going to come up with a long-term solution that is the best solution, right? So did you actually fix the bug long-term? So those are the two calibrating questions there. And then we have a quote from Adam. Insisting on the highest standards is about not putting up with any kind of mediocrity in what we deliver. So just making sure that we did our utmost best. And think big. So the definition of think big. Thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Leaders create and communicate a bold direction that inspires results. They think differently and look around corners for ways to serve customers. So your think big idea doesn't have to be right next to you per se. It doesn't have to be a big think big idea like directly in your team. It can literally be anything that would have an impact. It could have an impact on an entire department. It can have an impact on an entire organization. So some of the calibrating questions here are you looking outside of your team, organization, or customer or company for inspiration? So think of anything that others may think is impossible, and then work backwards to accomplish that. It may require you to work with several other individuals to bring your idea to fruition, and that's natural here. That's very normal that we're constantly collaborating with other teams in order to make our think big ideas happen. Don't focus on competitors. The number 2 calibrating question says, are you too focused on competitors? We never really focus on what our competitors are doing. If they've done it, it's not a think big idea anymore for us. It's already been done. Therefore, we can do that. Again, it's not a think big idea. Are you letting the current state define your thinking? So don't think of what it looks like today. You have to almost step outside of what it looks like today. And when I say it, I mean anything. It can be a problem. It can be the way you work. It can be a process. It can be a tool you're using. And more so think of how you would want it to look, and then work to get it that way. And that brings us to our next leadership principle, and which is bias for action. And I will let Jackie take over from here.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes. So we'll go through the remaining leadership principles here. So we've got bias for action. Speed matters in business. Many decisions and actions are reversible and do not need extensive study. We value calculated risk taking. I would say this is, while we don't necessarily have a favorite or number one leadership principle by any means, they're all important to us in different ways. I think this one really rises to the top in a lot of situations here. For me, bias for action, this definition, I think really comes to mind the thought process of one-way versus two-way door decisions. So essentially one-way door decisions being that these cannot be easily reversed. They typically need to be very carefully done and thought through, versus a two-way door decision could be reversed, meaning you can walk through the door, decide, oh, we need to make a change on something, and then walk back through it to make that change. These decisions can typically be fast or even automated. So when I think of bias for action, we're thinking about these two types of decisions and how can we kind of gravitate more towards the two-way door decisions so that we can make decisions quickly here. So some questions, you might want to think about while you're kind of thinking of, are you calibrated around bias for action, is like, could you potentially be asking other peers or partners for additional perspectives just to make sure that, you are in fact on the right track? Are you waiting for approvals on something that you already know is right? Perhaps this is a situation that you've already encountered before. You have a solution that has worked previously. Could you use that strong judgment that you have to just take that decision forward with the information that you already have? And also kind of thinking through, what's the impact of this decision if I'm waiting longer? Perhaps, my customers are waiting for something from me, and the longer I wait, the more strain that puts on our relationship, or perhaps like the final deliverable. So thinking through some of those factors can also help in deciding, like, is this a two-way decision that I can make right now, versus something that needs more extensive thought, or research behind it. So next slide, please. All right, frugality. I think this is a really interesting one. And I think that for Amazon in particular, I find when I'm speaking with candidates often that they find this to be an interesting leadership principle, because I think oftentimes people assume because we're a large company that means we perhaps don't think about frugality. And I would like to say that frugality is more than just thinking about how we're spending money. There's a lot of things that we can be more frugal with in regards to time and resources. So starting with the definition here, accomplish more with less. Constraints breed resourcefulness, self-sufficiency, and invention. There are no extra points for growing headcount, budget size, or fixed expense. So some things to kind of think about here when it comes to frugality. And again, this is not necessarily just related to spending. Other ways that we can think about how we're frugal with our time and efforts. Does your team own services that are overscaled, using more hosts or resources perhaps than they really need? This could be really a time to really dive deep into your process and review kind of what could be potentially improved here, or even eliminated to reduce waste essentially that isn't necessarily needed here. Do you invest time in process improvements that will save your team more time in the long run? I think that kind of ties in with the first question here, but I think with a lot of our leadership principles and just overall thought process and approach to problem solving at Amazon is that we are ultimately trying to look for the best long-term decision versus just a temporary short-term gain. So especially in the sense of frugality, we want to look at from a long-term perspective, and that could be, dependent on your situation. Long-term could be 6 months, could be 2 years, could be 5 years. How are we looking at the full picture of the possible outcome from here? And then, are you frugal with time? Oftentimes, I think we are called to unnecessary meetings or slow manual processes that can waste time, or even, your own or your coworkers. I always this comes to mind to me when I think about a meeting. And I'm in a meeting and I think this probably could have been an email. I'm sure others out there have had similar experiences. But so I think when you're on the end of potentially creating that meeting, really think and take the time to decide, is this something that I need to have an in-person conversation with someone? Be strategic about the individuals that you're inviting to that meeting, and making sure that everyone is there, has a purpose for being there and spending that time together. Could this be an email? Could this be a quick, Slack conversation that we're having instead to make a decision, versus taking the time to get everybody together? So, next slide, please. Earn trust. Okay. We have approached my favorite leadership principle. And I think this is my favorite for multiple reasons. Personally, I think I identify with this one specifically, but I also think in the world of being a good partner to those that I'm working with, earning trust with those individuals is just really critical to making that a strong relationship. So I want people to kind of keep in mind as we're going through this leadership principle that this really can apply to anyone that you're working with, peers and teammates, managers that, perhaps you report to, or others within your reporting chain. This could be business partners that you're working with, whether it be internal or external. This could be vendors or other support staff or companies or things that you're working with. I think trust can be very easily broken, but can obviously be very difficult to gain once that has happened. So leaders can listen attentively, speak candidly, and treat others respectfully. They are vocally self-critical, even when doing so is awkward or embarrassing. Leaders do not believe that their own team's body odor smells of perfume. They benchmark themselves and their teams against the best. So really what we're looking at here and kind of thinking through is, how are you reacting to perhaps uncomfortable questions or situations? I think our culture at Amazon is constantly seeking feedback in several different forms, whether it just be internally with those that we're partnering with. And we are especially a very feedback driven company to those external customers that we're working with as well. And if you're a customer of Amazon, you've probably seen that we've asked for your feedback in some way. And that's because we're always wanting to keep the trust that we have built with our customers and ensure that we're maintaining that. So when you are potentially asking for that feedback and getting, perhaps responses that aren't necessarily you're a fan of or agree with, I think it's really important to kind of take that information in and try to look at it from the other individual's perspective of maybe why are they responding in that particular way. Another thing to think about, are you hiding or minimizing the impact of an error? This can be from your own individual perspective and potentially, a mistake happens and we're human and that happens at times. I think an interesting concept that we have here is that I'd like to think that we use the term escalation here a little bit differently than others might be used to using it or seeing it. Oftentimes, I think when people hear the word escalation, they think something bad, something is a mistake, I'm getting in trouble. That's not necessarily what our approach is here. When we use escalation, we're thinking about how are we getting visibility and the right type of attention on something that needs attention, whether it's a problem or in that moment or is going to be a problem down the road. It's about making sure that we're bringing up this information, whether it was an error or something that needs attention, to make sure that we're not pointing fingers here, but ultimately we're here to help try to solve this problem. And then I think also it's really important to ask yourself, are you listening or just waiting to have your turn to talk? It's really important to earn trust by being a good listener as well, and listening attentively to someone and making sure that everyone's kind of having that seat at the table and able to give their opinion and really kind of keep that trust with their partner. So next slide, please. Great. All right. Dive deep here. I think this leadership principle ties in really well to some of the others that we've seen so far today. As Monica kind of mentioned, there's a lot of overlap in some of these, and there's also some that are very contradictory to each other. For example, it'd be very difficult to dive deep and have bias for action at the same time. For dive deep specifically, we're looking at leaders operate at all levels. They stay connected to the details and audit frequently, and are skeptical when metrics and anecdote differ. No task is beneath them. So dive deep is really for those situations where perhaps, we're seeing some discrepancies and we really need to dive into perhaps this information to ensure where is this error or issue coming from. It's really some questions you can be asking yourself are, do you have a good process in place for tracking progress? I like to think about this question in the sense of if I was going to look back on this project or process down the road, do you have some sort of method for tracking any learnings that you had or opportunities? I think it's really important to find the right method for you or your company or your work that you can track and archive information or findings for future use. We're not necessarily always focused on reinventing the wheel. Sometimes we can look back through archived information that could be helpful for us in solving a problem that might just be a different perspective of something we just, again, it's critical to kind of track that information for us. What risk here are you facing and how will you get around them? So essentially kind of looking through what's my plan here with the risks that I have and how am I going to be addressing those? What are my backup plans if, my initial plan isn't going to be working here? And do you have the resources to deliver what you promise? So perhaps you have a business plan set out to say this is what my plan is, a deliverable, for a partner that you're working with, do you actually have the resources to be able to follow through on that plan? So that's why kind of diving in deeply and looking at all the critical details is really important for people to be doing. Next slide, please. Awesome. All right. Have backbone, disagree, commit. I think this is a really interesting one. And I think this is one leadership principle that kind of like Monica mentioned with the are right a lot, is a challenging one for a lot of people. And typically this becomes more of a mastered skill for someone with experience and tenure. It's just, I think, a challenging place to understand the have backbone and the disagree and commit portion here. So the definition here being leaders are obligated to respectfully challenge decisions when they disagree, even when doing so is uncomfortable or exhausting. Leaders have conviction and are tenacious. They do not compromise for the sake of social cohesion. Once a decision is determined, they commit wholly. So I look at this leadership principle as essentially kind of two ones, two leadership principles that are put together in one. So the have backbone piece is essentially saying when you are, reviewing a document or you're in a meeting and it's something that you don't necessarily agree with, we encourage people here to bring those opinions forward and respectfully challenge perhaps a decision that's being made or an idea that's being thrown around. And when doing so, it's really critical to come forward with data or metrics to help support that information and that thought process that you have there. The kind of second part of this being the disagree and commit. So perhaps we're going through this decision-making process. You've put forth your idea. You've supported that with data and metrics as to why you think this is the right idea, but perhaps the team is going to decide to go with a different idea or in a different direction. So the disagree and commit part is saying, I disagree, with the path that you're choosing, but despite that, I'm still going to fully commit to this process and give my 100% effort here. I think that's a really critical piece and a challenging piece for people to learn throughout their career, because it can be, frustrating at times when someone isn't necessarily agreeing with your decision. And maybe you have information that shows like my decision probably is the best path. But again, it's really about taking the collective team's decision and 100% committing to that and moving forward for the betterment of the entire group and organization. All right, so we've got deliver results here. Leaders focus on the key inputs for their business and deliver them with the right quality in a timely fashion, despite setbacks. They rise to the occasion and never settle. So this leadership principle for me, I really kind of think about this being paired well with bias for action. I think people can, act quickly and deliver on behalf of whatever their business or commitment is. So some things to think about here: is your team set up for successful delivery? What risks are you facing and how will you get around them? Do you have a backup plan? Sorry, you hear my toddler in the background. He just woke up from his nap. So do you have a backup plan if you can't get around these risks? I think is really critical to think about. Do you have resources to deliver what you promised? And if not, here, are you raising up those concerns? Thinking about what this impact would have on your timeline for delivery. Perhaps if there are stakeholders that need to be aware of, the impact here, this would be the time to let those stakeholders know. All right, we'll go to the next one. So the next two and our final two leadership principles here are two of our newest ones that we've added. And I think they're just a really interesting approach to not just how you can be as an individual at the company, but how Amazon as a whole is trying to have a greater impact. I mean, we recognize that we're a large scale company, and that also has a big impact on not just where we're located here in the United States, but globally as well. So we've added two leadership principles to really be mindful of kind of the fact that we are a global company here. So this first one here is strive to be Earth's best employer. And this is kind of a play on a previous statement or mission that Amazon had as far as this leadership principle to be Earth's most customer-centric company. We also want to focus on being a great employer to work for as well. So our definition here is a little long, but I think it's really critical to our company. Leaders work every day to create a safer, more productive, higher performing, more diverse, and more just work environment. They lead with empathy, have fun at work, and make it easy for others to have fun. Leaders ask themselves, are my fellow employees growing? Are they empowered? Are they ready for what's next? Leaders have a vision for and commitment to their employees' personal success, whether that be at Amazon or elsewhere. I want to really emphasize for this leadership principle, and really for all of them, when we use the term leader, that doesn't necessarily mean that this just applies to people that are people managers. All of these leadership principles, and particularly this one and the next one we're going to cover, can really be just as applicable to someone who's an individual contributor. You don't have to be a manager to be a leader within your team or organization. So for this leadership principle, kind of thinking about, does everyone around me feel valued, informed, connected, safe, supported, respected, and are they being treated fairly? Again, as an individual, this is something that you can be looking at on a daily basis of just your kind of outward approach to how you're interacting with your peers and partner teams as well. And I think also identifying if you are seeing others that perhaps are not being supported or treated respectfully and fairly, kind of what's the right way to approach that and help problem solve that area? Are you identifying ways to overcome conscious or even unconscious bias? Again, if you're kind of identifying that within yourself or seeing that in other situations, have that responsibility in yourself to bring that information forward. All right, we'll wrap us up with the final leadership principle here, which is success and scale bring broad responsibility. So this, I think, is the leadership principle that really encompasses the fact that Amazon is a global company. So starting with the definition here, we started in a garage, but we're not there anymore. We are big, we impact the world, and we are far from perfect. We must be humble and thoughtful about even the secondary efforts of our actions. Our local communities, planet, and our future generations need us to be better every day. We must begin each day with a determination to make better, do better, and be better for our customers, our employees, and our partners, and the world at large. And we must end every day knowing that we can do even more tomorrow. Leaders create more than they consume and always leave things better than how they found them. So again, I think that really encompasses our goal to, really understand the impact that we have globally here. So kind of some calibrating questions again that you'll want to think about here is, are you, contributing your time, skill, knowledge, or expertise to help someone or others? This, I think, really ties in with the leadership principle, learn to be curious. You can certainly learn that information and share that out with others as well. Are you actively listening and asking the right questions to find, a way to make differences or contribution, whether that be, within your specific work area or even outside of the work that you're responsible for. So, all right, I think with that, we'll probably open it up to just perhaps any questions that there might be.
Well, of course I have questions, but I want to say this is a safe space. The babies are welcome too. You can bring them and have them sit and ask questions too. How it's okay. Yeah. But I did have a question, and we said we weren't going to go all the way, but it's now 7 minutes to the top of the hour. But my question is, for the leadership principles that you've outlined, how does that work when you are sourcing for candidates? Meaning, what can our members do to ensure that they're articulating their experiences in the appropriate way to meet whatever qualifications or expectations you are because I'm assuming you use those leadership principles when sourcing.
So, when we're sourcing, I would say first we're focused on honestly that person's experience. So at the sourcing level, we're looking at the job description, we're looking at the person's qualifications, and that's where we start. I would say the leadership principles really jump in right at that first call with your recruiter. We will ask basic questions at first. We want to make sure that the job is in your area of interest, whether it has a commute or not, simple questions. And then we jump into questions about experience. And through those answers, we can identify some leadership principles. Learn and be curious might jump out at us. I can't say that we are necessarily first of all, we never look for all the leadership principles. We don't ever expect anyone at any given time, whether it's first call, second call, interview, day one, month one, year one, you may not have every single leadership principle, and that's fine. So we do, some of the leadership principles will stand out through the first conversation, and that's great. But I would say we're really focused on the skills. Are you skilled? And earns trust. Sometimes you can pick that up right away. That's great. And then throughout the first interview with a team member, they're assessing your technical skills, but they are asking questions that directly pertain to leadership principles. It's probably more tech heavy, and a few LP questions. And then once you get to your on-site, you can flip it. It's really LP heavy. You're still drawing from your experience. So we're gaining knowledge about your tech skill, but it's really LP heavy. And you find that out soon because you get your prep material, which, I mean, it talks about the LPs and how to prepare for them.
No, that's great. Just to know, because I mean, the LPs are part of the culture, right? And even when our individual leaders are out there interviewing with various companies, you're trying to get a sense and you're trying to get a feel for what that company culture is like. And so it works both ways. So thank you so much for sharing that particular information. I don't know. We have folks out there on YouTube as well as here locally. If there's any questions, we have about 4 minutes for questions.
So Mary, in the interim, while you wait for questions, I just wanted to add, although we are not looking for LPs in a resume necessarily, because that's hard to do. Let's be real. That's hard to do. That comes through conversation and I need to hear from you. I think this material is extremely helpful for anyone, obviously putting their resume together, because I mean, certifications that you might have, classes that you've taken on your own, problems that you've solved, scope, scale, everything. So as you read through these LPs and what we're looking for ultimately, it will help you build a great resume. It'll help you prepare.
No, yeah, that's a great point. I think that, what I tell our leaders is, when we're prepping and things like that, it's, you want to look at what's being asked and then show and draw on your experience to set out an example of what meaning that is, for you. It's like whatever, if it's be curious, or you're able to draw on that experience if you're prepared going in to understand how that would read. I'm former FBI. They put us through a lot of stuff. And you had the behavioral based questions and those types of things, and understanding that our candidates out there want to be able to understand that you're drawing on your experience and you want to highlight those things that actually go along with what that company is looking for. Yeah, I do not have any YouTube questions. No one internally. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we do have a question. It says, are certain teams more likely to have a certain type of LP? So depending on the type of team that you're on, is there a certain characteristic or trait that you could say that that particular LP goes well with a particular role?
That's a great question. I'll let Jackie answer it.
Yeah, no, happy to. I would say the short answer is yes. Each team and organization is likely going to have leadership principles that are more important to them than others. And that can also vary by the type of job that you're interviewing for. So for example, like myself as a recruiter, the leadership principles that are critical for my job might be different and are different than, let's say, a software engineer or a technical program manager. So an organization's kind of going to determine for them, what's the top, let's say, 4 or 5 leadership principles that are really critical must-haves for them. And then another kind of factor that can vary for leadership principles is the level of the position that you're going for. So someone that's coming in for more of an entry level position, we're typically looking at leadership principles like customer obsession, deliver results, bias for action. Essentially, can you do the expectations of what the job has set and just deliver on? Typically, someone's providing you guidance and you're following that guidance, versus as you become more senior and tenured in your career, not just at Amazon, but just in general. We're going to dive into some of those leadership principles that we've talked about as more challenging, the R right a lot, dive deep, think big, that are really kind of looking outside of just the standard box scope of your work and pushing outside of that. So to answer your question shortly, yes, it's going to vary by team. But typically, if we're interviewing someone and we're doing that prep call, like Monica mentioned, that's what I host with candidates. We're providing some guidance on what are the things that we're going to cover and what's really most important to us going through this interview. So you'd have an idea of what that would look like before interviewing with us.
That's awesome and amazing. And I want to thank both of you for spending time with our aspirers today, to be able to answer these questions. If anyone out there has any questions, you can make a comment on the YouTube, or you can actually, send me an email, and I'll get the questions to Monica or Jackie. So thank you guys so much for spending time with us today, and we look forward to your session next month. Everybody else out there, thank you so much for joining us on the YouTube channel. Like, subscribe. You'll get updates when we have another a podcast, or I'm sorry, another VCast. And thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye.
Bye.